Office here at Marysville Township at 108. I'm getting a report there's a possible shooting in the cafeteria. You're on site right now.
10-10. Scene secure for 8. Get him in here.
Contact.
Medic 61.
Medic 61 requesting you stand by in the area. It'll be a GSW. Copy. So I have 865 SALS. These are confirming 2 code black 3.
Dispatch, confirming 2 code black. From the cafeteria, snowpack.
Okay, folks, let's do what we came to do. I recognize a few faces. That's nice. You are on social media today. You're the face of the department. That's a big deal. I did that like double click thing so the red heart comes up, right? I'm one of those. Let's get started. My name's Steve Nicholas. A few things about me, and then I'd like to go up and down throughout the aisles and figure out who the audience is today. Bottom line, everything that we're going to do needs to be relevant to you. So this curriculum I've been working with for quite a few years and just building and building, but at any point we will deviate and we'll make it about you specifically and the population that you serve. And I choose that word on purpose. We serve. We've been asked to serve. It's an incredible honor. That's what I'm here to do for you today. With that in mind, Steve Nicholas, bunch of alphabet soup behind my name. Long story short, I went to the University of Nevada, Reno for 16 years. Out of those 5 degrees, my terminal degree is my doctorate in counseling and educational psychology. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a nationally certified counselor nationwide. I'm an approved supervisor for counselors nationwide, so all that stuff. Bottom line, I'm a clinician, and I like to work with people in the trenches. I have a comprehensive private practice here in Reno and downtown, but then I also have a couple side hustles. TM's one of them. So we're doing this new model where Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District is going to try to do something obvious and intentional. We're going to start prioritizing mental health, wellness, balance on top of physical health and training. So we don't just train on our bodies, with our bodies. We don't just train on apparatus, with apparatus. We're going to train the noodle as well. Quite an obvious idea, right? So we started this little pilot program for 6 months where I got to do a little dance and presentation in front of the county commissioners. They ate it up, and I said essentially just that. We get to be balanced people and then serve. So this is a 6-month pilot where I'm working essentially at the top of a pyramid with the peer support heads and with the brass in the office. Welcome. And then that waters down into the peer support network of TM and then to the general membership. On top of that, I'm helping out with the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network. And if you haven't heard about that, I'm pretty sure you have. That is very quickly becoming sought after. There are agencies and districts all over the U.S. now who are saying, what are you guys doing? And Captain Derek Reed is the main man on that one. And if you see him, give him a pat on the back because he's helping so many people start to normalize the conversation that we're going to walk through today. My other side hustle is with our federal government. So for a couple of years now, I've been fortunate enough to work with BLM, with Wildland Fire. That's bridging into Forest Service. That's working also with coordinators in dispatch. It's just going and going. Even CAL FIRE is going to get off their hands and start doing some cool stuff. So I get to work with all sorts of folks and talk about not suicide prevention, but as you'll see, I copyrighted a model that I call living ideation. We're not just going to talk about suicidal ideation and how to reduce that. We can do that after we've tried to amplify what I term a living ideation. And this is a no-brainer. Everybody probably thinks they know this stuff, but nobody actually does this stuff. So that's what we're here to do today. Anybody need to know anything about me? Anything else? I'll show you the good stuff here in a minute on a slide. This is some of what we're doing today, assuming I can get this rolling right. Let me get way over here. We stop anytime you need to stop. So this is a little bit about me again. I'm a Northern Nevadan. I like to say that I'm fairly familiar with every dirt road north of Nye County. I try not to go south of Nye County, if that tells you I like blue and not red. The research that I did, I was fortunate enough to write 3 doctoral dissertations during my 7-year program. And they were all around the phenomenon of suicide, and especially around I think it was my second dissertation. There was a committee member across the mahogany, because they're loaded in those rooms, and the mahogany table. And he puts his hand down and he said, "Steve, it seems like you're trying to cure suicide." I said, "Well, of course I am. Duh." And then it hit me. There's no cure. This is a human affliction, but perhaps it's not, which is some of the content that I go into. That it's, there's an old researcher, guy named by Edwin Schneidman. He had the best concept. He called it psychache. That psychache is part of being human. We hurt, but we also do other stuff than hurt. So my final publication was taking families and organizations that lose a prominent member to suicide and not doing anything except watching and documenting what they did. And after quite a few months and years, traced the behavioral patterns of families and organizations to see how they either became more connected or blew apart with great disconnection. So I traced those behavioral pathways. Ended up being pretty compelling stuff, which went into all of my current research that I call living ideation, because there are behavioral ways that people can become bigger, better, more awake, resilient, if we want to use that catchphrase, after great loss. But bottom line is, unfortunately, we have to pay attention to the great loss and apply it to our own worlds. There's a wonderful line from a horrible movie. I would be super impressed if anybody got it. And it goes like this. Most in the world are asleep, and very few are awake. And those who are awake are unfortunately cursed to never fall asleep again. I think that's the survivor concept right there. Right? Most are asleep and very few are awake. Those who are awake, it's us, are cursed. You don't never get to fall asleep again. Right? And that's a first responder's life right there. That's a servant's life right there. Anybody know the movie, by the way? I'm embarrassed. Joe versus the volcano. So bad, right? Okay. That is my trusty bird dog, Scout. He's awesome. He comes to my office with me. He's not a therapy dog. He's just a dog that goes to therapy. So this is how I warm up perspectives almost every time that I do my work. I want you to think about this. I'll walk you through. Dial it in for a second. Take a few seconds to focus on you, on your life, just this day. This is the only day that really exists. I want you to focus on this very moment. This is the only one that's real. Your butts are planted in a seat. Take a little inventory, gang. How's your life going? Just yours. Don't think about anybody else. Just you. How you doing? Think about the relationships that you're involved in. Envision people who you love. Doesn't have to be family. Hear them laugh. Some of you are thinking of giggles, little kid giggles right now. Hear them laugh. Picture one person. Imagine what you might tell them in this very moment. This very moment, your hearts are a little fuller than they normally are. Imagine what you would tell that person right now. It's probably nothing sour or in vain. I want you to think about what you have been called to do as a profession. I want you to think about your upcoming season. I want you to think about your upcoming shift. As I said, a lot of this is preseason stuff. Think about the shift you're on right now. I want you to imagine who you'll work really hard for. And then imagine all those lives that you touch and how they're doing. The people that you might meet this afternoon, how they're going to be doing. Jeff Dill was here Monday, and he had us pair up, look each other in the eye, and see how believable it was when we said, "I will give my life for you today." And the woman who I said that to, I think she believed me, but I totally believed her when she said that. So think about the lives you touch. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, by the way, take about 14 seconds and write that little piece of communication to that person you were thinking of. Okay? I'll do it too. I'll text it real quick. Find out one person. Write them a little note. Oh. Where is she? There she is. Boom. That's all it is. Just send a brick, or don't send it. I did this with one of my colleagues, and she wrote a note, and it was to her husband, and it got buried on the pile that everybody has on the desk. And it was like a month and a half later, and he was in her office, and they were straight in her office, and he found it, and he read it. It impacted their marriage, because she said something, some sweetie pie kind of thing on that note, right? And that totally changed things. Now, I'm going to guarantee, I know how to do two things: catch fish and know when my mom's going to call. Because I just texted her, I hope that you're having a great day. Okay? There'll be a fish on very quickly. I got to turn Bluetooth on though. So that's living ideation. You're here today, so put your head into it. What you do for a living, for a profession, you put your back, you put your heart and your soul into. But living ideation is putting your head, putting your heart into it as well. This is what we're going to go over. Okay? We're going to talk, look at the middle ones. Post-traumatic stress, post-traumatic growth. Basics of looking and recognizing suicide, but then also changing your culture. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We'll do this. I'm going to start to normalize suicide. This raises eyebrows regularly. I did this in lovely Winnemucca a couple years ago, and I had 3 people simultaneously look at each other, get up, and walk out when I started normalizing the phenomenon of suicide. Unfortunately, those 3 people were the 3 administrators of the schools. Yeah, they didn't want to talk about that. Because when you talk about suicide, you increase suicide. Does anybody actually think that's true? Thank you. Talking about suicide is respectful. And also, as people who have been called to serve in our communities, it's the right thing to do. So I should probably get that bigger. Let's actually say these things out loud. Not your personal views, but the world's views. What are some common thoughts about suicide? I'll start. It's a sin. You are hell-bound. Suicide's a sin. It's acting out. You're acting out. It's selfish. Weak. Come on. It's attention seeking. You work with kids. Coward. Right, that's a common one. Suicide is what? Tragic. I thought you said torture. I was liking that one too. Yeah, it is tragic. It is torturous. What else? Suicide is hopelessness. Maybe even helplessness. Right? Anger. Gone way dark, right? We're missing a few. Devastating. Yep. Absolutely. It's irreversible. No turning back. What an amazing display of power to somebody who probably is considering themselves without power. Suicide is the most powerful demonstration one ultimately could do. How about peaceful? How about generous? How about thoughtful? Euthanasia? Dignity? State of Nevada specifically in the last 3 legislative sessions has had right to die assisted suicide legislation proposed. The entire West Coast has already approved it. So these conversations aren't going away, but it's adding a different concept to somebody who is terminally ill. It's giving them a different, perhaps more graceful option. So somebody looking for another option, especially when they contemplate that this awful pile of my existence is all that I am. Wouldn't we wish that person peace? Yeah. So when we are working with our brothers and sisters and our loved ones and we find that we want to talk them out and be like, oh, stop that. You're doing great. Most invalidating thing you could ever do right there. Oh my goodness, you hurt so bad. Let's hang out. That all of a sudden is a non-perfectly awful. I'll just kind of be monologuing a little bit here and there. Imagine when you're working with somebody who's in such a state of despair and you don't try to talk them out of that. They're not only in despair, they were alone, but now you're hanging. Isn't that interesting? You don't have to be an elixir for anybody's darkness, but what if you were just going to sit in the trench with them for a while? Amazing what happens. If you want to make this note, great. Memorize this phrase. Watch, wait, and wonder. I had a lovely intern, graduate intern, say that to me a while back, and it changed my whole career. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's brilliant. You find somebody who's in despair, or you recognize your own despair, watch it. Just check it out. What is this? Self? What is this world? And then you wait on that? What happens when it's marinating? You start wondering about it, right? So you wake up just in a craptastic mood. You're just in a bad way in the morning. And what if you just paid attention to it and did nothing? What happens next? What? You might keep spiraling down? You might, right? What else might happen?
Pick it apart, digest it a little bit.
You might start chewing on it. What happens if you start chewing on it? You might spiral down. What?
Or let it go.
Or it might evaporate. Or you might consciously try to fight it and let it go, right? If you watch it and you wait, then you start marinating it. It starts to wander and wonder, and it changes. Every moment moves. Sometimes they go darker. A lot of times they don't. Every one of us in this room has had a really dark thought, or 100 million. Because we have really big thinking brains, we're living extraordinary lives and experiences. Those aren't all awesome. Even Disneyland sucks sometimes. Lines? Okay? You want to see people have tantrums? Such a cool human experience. Go to the Magic Kingdom. Okay? You will find people just out of their minds, stoked. What's up, Mom? All is well with the world. I just finished the application process for oh, now she's talking money. But she's good. Fish on. Go to Disneyland. You will people see the full human experience, including the meltdowns. Huh. Good thing there's churros. Disney's smart. So more narratives, they're not just all awful. And in fact, this is my jam, I have studied suicide back to the times when people were first starting to write. In Greco-Roman times, suicide was not a bad thing. It was somebody's final stamp on their life's work. And they said, I think that'll be the last page of my life right there. Okay, pass the hemlock. It was their choice. And then there would be essentially honor and recognition after that and be like, what a good game. Wow. And for a lot of reasons, it's taken a real dark turn. But suicide, even in the year 2020, is not always frowned upon around the world. In our culture, absolutely it is. Okay? But suicide is a last resort for somebody in super darkness in our culture. And it is. And that's what we're here to get in the way of. Now I need you to know about yourself. We don't have to say them out loud. In fact, I don't want you to. Just know you. Know what you think about suicide. And then recognize the logic that you probably put that into a conversation, right? So if you were working with somebody who was in such a dark place, and you respected them enough to ask them, have you thought about taking your life? Have you thought about killing yourself? And they say yes. If you rush straight into fix-it mode, because we've got at least a couple people in here are fairly on task and like to fix things. If you went straight into fix-it mode, you just messed up. Because you actually reinforced broken. We fix things that are broken. True? So if you were working with somebody who you love, and they started communicating that they were in such a dark place that they were considering being dead that day, I wonder what a little bit of partnership, maybe even a hug, maybe even just, hey, want the other half of my sandwich? Want some tea? What about just some connection? Might that do something different? If you wait with them, what happens next? Something, but it's probably not downward spiral. When you're working with somebody who is suffering, you don't get to fix them because that's not yours to fix. They can fix themselves with time and enough opportunity and their own grown ability. All of us are amazingly powerful once we get there. in the times that we're not super powerful, wouldn't it be beautiful just to have somebody who loves you? Right? And you all would do that for each other in this room. Every one of us would do that for every one of us in this room without even knowing each other. Right? Because that's what we do. So we would love. Love and death are interesting partners. If I was in my darkest state and you said, Steve, I don't know how to help this man, but is it cool if we hang out? Wait a minute. I suck. I'm no good. Don't hang with me, but you're hanging with me? Now I'm confused. Do I suck? Am I all bad? In shrinkology, that's called cognitive dissonance. It's this little tussle in the brain. Well, the good news is that one side always wins. So when we promote this cognitive dissonance, this little tussle in the brain with somebody who is in such a dark place, the tussle is a little bit of goodness. Take a very clean glass of water or bottle of water, and I want you to add 3 drops of dark blue food coloring. Go pack, okay? What happens to that water? It's blue. So you could take the worst damn day and you add 3 little tiny aspects of, I'm going to sit right here with you. I really appreciate the time with you. You want some M&Ms? All of a sudden you got 3 drops of food coloring in what was just awful, right? That's not pure awful anymore. It's awful and some other stuff. You want to know why a lot of therapists, but especially alcohol and drug counselors, have bowls of chocolate at the end of their desk? It's for cognitive dissonance. You find somebody who's struggling with relapse. That's a darkness of its own, right? Somebody like, so they eat a little piece of candy and their tongue slaps their brain with a little bit of inquiry and excitement. That's cognitive dissonance. They're not just upset. They're not just in darkness. And there's Hershey's. See where I'm going with that? So it's the and piece. So we don't have to fix darkness. If we sit with them long enough, it starts to walk itself elsewhere. The elixirs to darkness are light. Truce to suicide. Bear with me. This is where the folks in the mucka got up and walked out. Suicide makes sense to the person doing it. Suicide makes sense, gang. Suicide is not irrational if you give the person enough respect of having their worldview is that bad. Suicide would make sense. I wish for peace. Therefore, peace is the anti-awful, right? Suicide ends a life or death struggle for one, while beginning this interesting dilemma for all of us. Bereavement is a funny bugger. We as helpers empathize with the suicidal person. Uh-oh, but now I got to stop you? I'm a mandated reporter. Means if it really got to that level and I could not talk you down, I got to call help. And help comes in a couple of forms. Ideally, it's a warm handoff with loving people. Sometimes it's in the cold plastic seat in the back of a patrol car. That option sucks. So the warm handoff, even that's actually a common phrase, do a warm handoff. Think of the beauty that's embedded in warm handoff. It means I love you, right? I love you and I think I should be dead are in conflict. Now, knock on wood, I have lost 6 people in my clinical history. But I do the suicide game, full court press, a lot. So I like my batting average because if I'm in the same room with somebody and I'm going to take as much time as necessary, I really like my chances of getting you to see something that is a little bit of light. There's no reason to live. Now I want you to imagine ice cold lemonade the 3rd week of August. I don't like lemonade. All right. Ice cream? But you start to think about something and all of a sudden you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember being a little kid and liking that stuff. Cool. You remember being a little kid and liking something? The mountain's a smidgen smaller. So you just got to open the door. Suicidal mindset happens when we're only down to 2 options. All awful in the absence of awful. When we crack that door and we got a 3rd player, we can play. You don't have to plant the seed. It's already there. We just have to find it and grow it. Okay? That's a living ideation. We got to grow that. What else? Suicide is not rational, however, suicide's rational. Suicide is logical, end pain. It's also psychological. It's an accumulation of pain. That's for the clinical folks. Thinking about suicide is not abnormal. Everybody in here has wondered, what is the meaning of life? We're all big-brained thinking people. We've all wondered, what does life mean? Which brings me to the first paragraph of a book I'm writing. I was 17 years old. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. I'm kind of a dick. And my dad said, all right, Mr. Awesome, if you're so smart, what's the meaning of life? I'm like, Pop, that's easy. The meaning of life is to live with meaning. I was 17. I was just popping off being a jerk, but it worked. But that actually, I believe that. We've all asked, what's the meaning of life? If you can't come up with anything, then somebody who loves you can help you recognize that there is meaning, right? That you can live with meaning. Who's on duty right now? Did you put any attention into the footwear? Is there meaning in the footwear that you're wearing right now? Yeah. I got some good boots. I was very thoughtful about spending that much money and what was inside the toes of those boots. Okay? There's meaning in that. There's meaning everywhere if you slow down, if you watch, and you wait, and you wonder about it. Okay? And we hear that bottom one all the time. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's really invalidating, by the way. I wouldn't encourage you to say that one. More suicide. It is not a movement toward death. People aren't trying to die. They would like to not hurt. If we were trying to die, we suck at it. Because if you look at everybody in here, we have successfully navigated 100% of our days. We're really good at living. We suck at dying. We're really good at living. That's living ideation. You want to start to marinate, germinate, grow, fertilize, water, don't overwater, what we do already successfully. Right? Sir, you know how to grow a hell of a mustache. That's awesome, because I'm like a prepubescent teen. I can't pull that off. So, but just anything. If you were having a super dark day and we're like, dude, how do you pull off the Andy Reid mustache? That's pretty amazing, right? So just anything goes. You're good at living, so start to recognize and acknowledge living. This is for you guys, by the way, so you cut in whenever you want. Otherwise, you're going to hear me monologuing. I did that. Time to, oh, that's my daughter. My daughter, can you imagine being a therapist's daughter? And I own a lot of guns, and she knows it. So she was writing an essay about this really wild book called The Jungle. Upton Sinclair, this is a book that described essentially the meatpacking industry, and it was kind of the start of labor unions. So Sinclair writes in here, and this is my daughter's added words to it. Sinclair suggests that we can be our own beast when he says, our own beast. When he says, of the disinherited of life, for whom there is no respite and no deliverance, to whom the world is a prison, a dungeon of torture, a tomb. That's a suicidal mindset. Who in the world, if that was you, I wish peace for you. Now, I don't think that has to equate to death. But sometimes, maybe even all of us, but I'll just say, I've totally thought that stuff before. Okay? I've also totally thought about other stuff. That's the cognitive dissonance. But for anybody that's ever been down a road like that, who am I to tell them that they're sinning by wanting to not feel that? So if you go that route, you just did some damage. But who are you to say, brother, I can't even understand what you're going through, but is it cool if we hang out? Is it cool if you tap out for the rest of this shift and I'll go with you? What's the treatment center for IFF? What is it? Center of Excellence, that's right. You realize that the very appropriate protocol when getting somebody there is for them not to get on the plane and travel alone? That's living ideation. Brother, sister, I'm coming with you for the warm handoff, not the good game, good luck, be thinking of you. No. It's we're going to do things together, because together is not super isolated and alone. So that one nugget right there. whatever's going to happen when we're working with folks who are afflicted with psychache, we're going to do it together. Because then, with time, something else happens. It unfolds. And if we're putting a little bit of love, not advice, in just love, just time, it moves, man. Well, man, it moves. So that's my daughter. On a phone, I think, right? Damn it, plug that in. Now I'm going to talk to you about Charlie Brown theory. So I came up with what I call Charlie Brown theory off of some very old research dusted off back in 1981 that a suicidal psychic type of mindset has three things going for it. When somebody lacks affiliation, when somebody cannot avoid pain, pain is around every turn, and when somebody never wins, when there's no achievement, that actually is such a dark place, sometimes it's irreversible. So, let's talk Charles Schulz. Beyond being a fantastically cool comic that we could all relate to, he was a massive theologian. I own 100% of Schulz's work. Okay? There's so much theology and philosophy peppered into this stuff, you really think that Chuck's going to be in a bad way, but it always turns around, right? So, did he lack affiliation? Yes. He's always isolated on the mound. He always plays in the one spot, by the way, right? So Chuck, and he's never like, hey, good game, good job, pitch. So he's always isolated. When he does throw a ball, I don't know who he's throwing against, but they line him every single time to the degree that it blows his clothes off, right? So Chuck, he's alone. He cannot avoid pain. And dude doesn't win, ever. I have 100% of Schulz's Peanuts cartoons. Charlie Brown never kicked the ball. Ever. Now, you can say what you want about Lucy Van Pelt, but we just won't say it in here. She's mean. Okay? Charlie Brown never won. Now think about that. If that was your mindset, Chuck might have been suicidal, right? It's even written in the comics. What's wrong with me? Because he has so many just examples of, dude, there's so much wrong with you, right? So when the world is treating you that way, or you perceive that the world is treating me that way, do you see how suicide makes sense? Now, if we talk about young people, unfortunately, there was another loss at Damani Ranch High School this week, 14-year-old kid. This is for you. Kids have a different couple phenomenons going on. Our young people are at higher risk for suicide. They're actually not our most suicidal population at all. But they are at a higher risk of suicide for two specific variables. Anybody know why kids are at higher risk? It's okay to say it loudly. What? Social media is kind of factored into it. They're knuckleheads. You're exactly right. They do not have a depth and breadth of experience. They don't have a serious foundation of life to draw upon. When I said, hey, think of that glass of lemonade, ice cold lemonade in the third week of August, you'd be like, oh man, I was probably like 9, that was awesome. So you have a repertoire. You can go back, right? You can go back through the files. Teens don't have much of a file. Their hard drive is small. That's it. What's the other one? They're knuckleheads. Well, they can be chemically imbalanced, and I think that's close enough. Tongue in cheek, I say that they're Dane damaged. Yeah, you heard it. Their prefrontal cortex, the soccer ball spot, is the supervisor on duty. That supervisor isn't on duty until approximately age 24. That's why we do really stupid shit. Okay? The temporal lobes are in charge of memory and emotional regulation. Similar to the supervisor, it does not come into maturity until mid-20s. So our young people are at risk because of immaturity and impulsivity. So when something like, I didn't see it coming, I know, because it didn't reach that threshold of darkness until about 2:45 this afternoon. right? So you wouldn't see a ton of it coming. So there's an impulsivity and an immaturity with young people that happens to go into first response sometimes, by the way. So to make this applicable to the population we're thinking about today, when somebody is over-identified in the role that they have, then they probably do not have a breadth and depth of perspective and balance. That's kind of like being a teenager on social media. I worked with a young lady who said she could only be happy, this is the truth, I can only be happy if my Instagram post gets 1,000 likes. Like 1,000? Hell, kid, I don't think I know 1,000 people. I don't. I know like 4. Okay? I can only be liked if there's, like, I'm only worth. Therefore, I'm not worth if it's under 1,000. That tags into the impulsivity and immaturity, right? So it's not social media, but it kind of is. It's trickle. It's not chemical imbalance, but it kind of is. So let's take that young person and let's get them like heavy into weed. And if anybody thinks that modern weed is not addictive, we should probably talk. It's massively addicting. Weed of the year 2020 is not from 1984. So Charlie Brown. Here's a quick vignette. Kelly, triage call. There's no safe place is one of her quotes. She's in a DV relationship. Money is tight. Check to check. She has a 13-year-old who keeps running away, a 17-year-old who's dropping out of school, and she's a paramedic. She has consistent trauma exposure. Over and over and over. Oh yeah, and where the hell did my son go today? And all I wanted to do was provide my daughter to turn out better than I did, and she's dropping out of school. So how's Kelly doing? That mountain of awful, right? People in fire service or in first response or in the military have all of these consistent traumatic exposures on top of having a truck payment, on top of floating the power bill, because that's one thing that you could probably play with all your finances. You got all the real world that everybody has, and you have to wear a cape and act like it doesn't hurt. I have some buddies who were in Carson Fire a while back, and they were talking about using a snow shovel. Like, dude, what are you talking about? It's June. It's like, you think we're pushing snow with a snow shovel, Steve? Oh, that. And you have a truck payment, and your kid's dropping out of school or running away. You think it's probably easy to date people or, put yourself back out there because marriages fail at an extraordinarily high rate with first responders? No kidding, right? So we also understand how suicidal concepts and suicide rates are much higher in first response, in fire culture, in military. Well, no kidding. They would be. They would be higher rates. And it's not because of a deficiency in the maturity of your brain. It's because you are doing too damn much in that brain. And I'm never going to try to talk you out of being a superhero and having too much in your brain, but I will put a hand on your shoulder and I'll say, let's hang out for a few minutes, because that's a lot. I'm just going to validate it's your truth. That's your truth. It's brutal. I can't make it not brutal, but I can hang out. And I can buy you breakfast. You're buying next time, by the way. Notice my move, and I'm serious. I'm buying you breakfast. You got me next time? What did I just do? A what? Future orientation. If I can get you to describe something a little bit down the road, I'll take it. Down the road ain't dead. So, dude, we're going to the gold and silver. Gold and silver. And you're buying next Tuesday? Tuesday. Sweet. No shift? We're doing it. You just walked somebody. We didn't change how bad their world is. We just added pancakes. So, can we call 911 for Kelly? Who answers the phone? Kelly, what are you doing, girl? Right? She knows them. They know her. Y'all are from a small community. So who helps those who are helpers? Who helps you? You do. I do. But Remza calling on Remza, I don't know how realistic that is, right? Taking a first responder and putting them into treatment, that's a delicate process. And we're way ahead of that, so why don't we just love each other and see if we can start to diminish all the darkness and walk our way together through it. That's the cultural change, is that we're going to maximize the living concepts. Those heavily outcompete the dark concepts. Do you think the people who take their lives have depression and anxiety? Yeah, they got fleas and ticks. So people who take their lives have depression and anxiety. So if we try to normalize those experiences and then bond together with those in our cultures, all of a sudden we're going to start out competing the lethality of depression and anxiety. And I like where that could go. So we do it together. If we got rid of depression, if we knew how to treat depression effectively and quickly, we would not have the suicide stats that we have. What else we got? I could show you stats. I'll just say a lot. But I do want to show you my military stuff real quick. Where are you? Hold on. Yes, sir?
Back to where we were at. Just thinking about it, if I was sitting with her, having that conversation, developing that relationship, how far is too much and how little?
What if you asked Kelly that, man? Most of the things we think, it's all right to say. I'm worried about you, Kelly, and I don't know how much love to give you. I really don't know if you should be alone right now. I don't want you to feel alone right now. Well, I'll be fine. Okay. My bar is a little bit higher than fine. I'll take fine, but help me know that that's the truth. Right? And then, unfortunately, a fair amount of this is off of gut and how well you know somebody. Right? If I'm working with somebody and I don't particularly know them, I go off of clinical gut, and it's a highly trained one. Right? But I also go off of a little bit of proof. Go off a little bit of proof. So Kelly, all right, cool. I believe you. You got this tonight. Who are your other people? Who else could you hang with tonight? My mom lives right next door. That either might be awesome or it might be awful, Kelly. I don't know. But is it cool? Is it cool if mom comes over and hangs tonight? Would you be willing to do that? I feel comfortable enough leaving if you're good enough with your mom here tonight. So you keep surfing the wave until you know well enough. But here's the tough part. We still get to lose people because people still get to choose to be gone. We cannot stop all suicides, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be so arrogant to say that we should. But if somebody's absolute decision is that they will be gone, I'm not big enough man to stop that. I can get them on an involuntary hold. I can get them into mandated treatment with a damn signature. My signature puts people in cells. That's an awful amount of responsibility that I really don't want. But even when that happens, it is understandable that people would then be a little bit more motivated to take their lives after something like that, right? So how do you do it? Yes. When do you do it? Every darn time. So the idea that we're doing with TM is we're going to normalize the conversations that things are hard, and we'll do it together. Because it doesn't diminish the fact that they're hard. It just might diminish the fact that it's super dark and super alone, right? Alone and lonely are different. We can do things alone, but when you're perpetually lonely, that's uglier, right? There's no real answer for you. I'm sorry.
That was helpful.
First responder stats. These are very difficult to come by, and they're never accurate. Suicide stats in the normative population are underreported because generally they go off the death certificate, right? Rarely on a death certificate does it say death by suicide. Regularly, it talks about the mode, especially if there's overdose involved, right? So, in 2017, at least 103 firefighters and at least 140 police officers took their own lives compared to line of duty deaths. Wow, gang. You're more lethal than the job. The darkness is more lethal than you and the job. So if you will allow other people to love you, then that darkness changes. Notice the directionality of what I just said. You're already all good about going and serving others, walking up and saying, I got you. But are you big enough to be able to say, can you have me? Will you have my back? I'm struggling in a way that I can't describe right now. Then, if you're all on that similar level, you can have each other's back by allowing somebody to have your back. Now I'm going to go into some military stats where one part of the military gets it. Well, I'll get there. Look at that bottom quote. This comes off of the site of the Code Green Initiative. Anybody familiar with that? I'll find it for you. It is essentially a platform for folks in first response to be vulnerable. And that's a quote on the bottom right there from it. They never told us all the things we'll keep in our minds, the images, the brain deprivation, that cultural brainwash. Jeff Dill was just talking about that. That cultural brainwash of being strong, keep things to yourself, do not ask for help. What kind of nonsense is do not ask for help? But I understand the culture, shut up and dig, get it done. And there's time and place for that, absolutely. But don't ask for help? You're in professions where people are asking you for help. Will you please help me? Absolutely. Coming right up. It's what I do. It's who I am. But don't you think about asking for help for yourself. So let's start getting over ourselves in that regard. Right? Respectfully, let's start getting over ourselves. When I need help, I'm going to try to be big enough to say, I don't have it figured out today. And I'm pretty sure that my professional, clinical, and familial loved ones are going to be like, come on, I got you. Lemonade. NYPD lost 3 of their people within a 10-day span. That woke up lawmakers. Let me show you these, though. U.S. Marine and Navy suicides are at a 10-year high. That was this time last year. 68 active duty Navy personnel died by suicide in 2018, with 57 cases among the Marine Corps. Those are massively underreported. Do you know why they're massively underreported?
Insurance.
There's a lot of insurance. Yeah. There's also stigma that is frowned upon. So maybe somebody standing in the front of this room took an opportunity to go through OCS and be at Fort Benning, Georgia as the shrinkologist. Now imagine somebody going through basic gets referred to the shrinkologist's office and they walk in there. You think there are any other eyes watching that? Let alone when that person who's buttoned up well enough leaves that office and goes back to the barracks, somebody else walks into the shrinkologist's office and says, fit for duty? Whoa. You think there's any stigma about getting help? You think first response, fire culture is a whole lot different? There's a question of fitness. You fit for duty? Hell yeah, you might even be more fit now, right? You go balance out your head. You go express. I actually want to hang out with you. That's fit. That's fitness. Resilience isn't saying I can handle everything. Resilience is saying I know some limits and I know when I'm blown out, right? So our military, here we go. Marine Corps General Robert Neller. If you need help, please ask, speak up. We will be there for you. Consider the lasting impact on your family, friends, and unit, none of whom will ever truly recover. Don't choose a permanent solution to a temporary problem that can be resolved with the help of your teammates. I already gave you the punchline. Respectfully, General, that's idiocy. That's the perfectly wrong direction. Can you tell me why? This is the wrong direction for the people who we're serving. Why? It's become so common. We all start eating that.
Focus on being darker for others also.
It did throw a good dollop of shit, guilt and shame in there, right? If you take your life, thanks a lot.
Now there's a problem.
It is problem-oriented. It is guilt and shame. It's also saying, if you need help, let us know. And I'm proposing the exact opposite. I already know that you need help. Let's hang out. Not, I'll be around, I'll be available. No. Tuesday, gold and silver, pancakes. Their pancakes are ripping, by the way. But think about this. You flip it perfectly. I'm not going to wait for you to tell me that you need help. I'm coming after you because I love you. You're coming after me and I'll let you, right? We are going to size ourselves up and size each other up on purpose. Absolutely on purpose. That's the better direction. But in a military and a paramilitary type of system, we get a little bit confused about fit for duty, weakness, right? I'm here to say that that's strength. Of course it is. More elite professionals. U.S. Special Ops suicides tripled in 18. Listen to this, General. 4-star head of Special Operations is searching for answers. We are combating this scourge across the Department of Defense. We are keenly focused on preventing. Thomas favors publicly acknowledging the problem to avoid stigma and working to address root causes. For the Special Ops community, an increase in suicides is exceptionally sensitive because the 70,000 strong force is filled with troops who have multiple overseas combat deployments. So if we actually don't start confronting this in a pre-incident fashion, that the gig is hard, it's very challenging and tough, then we normalize, we don't talk about that stuff. If you don't normalize how hard it is, you don't have an avenue to start processing how challenging it is. When you have held a dead infant and you don't act like that mattered to you, you're doing it wrong. When you allow somebody to talk with you and acknowledge that that matters to all of us, something new happens. It doesn't feel good, but it's moving. There is no elixir or right choice of words to feel better in times of trial and tribulation. But there are opportunities to move with it so that we know we are not perfectly alone. Think about Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown got a lot of grief. In fact, his common phrase, good grief, right? But at the end, everything worked. Even the whole tree incident started turning around. Everybody decorated the tree, that ugly little tree, and made it nice, and danced and sang, and like gave him some props. Be like, got a free tree, kid, nice work, right? So this general has a better idea, and that one works. So there we go. That's all I need. What are the barriers? First response. What are your barriers? Besides stigma, besides getting over your own thoughts of, I think I'm weak if I ask for help. I think I'm weak if I accept help. There have been several members of, I will say, TM, Reno, Sparks, and now Carson, who I've spoken with brass, not to start loosening up the programming opportunities, but to just look them in the eye and say, I guarantee you've had really dark times. That's really all I said. And they're like, well, of course, yeah. It's like, aha. Let's start normalizing the darkness. That shines some light. It opens the blinds a bit. First responders compared to the general pop are heightened risk for depression, PTSD, and suicide. This is relevant to really all EMS. So let's talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not the boogeyman. It's real. It's super treatable, by the way. PTSD is not difficult to treat with a good clinician. but we can get way ahead of post-traumatic stress disorder. Everybody's exposed to stress, chronic, profound, gnarly stuff. That impacts you. If you allow it to impact you and you process it impacting you, it doesn't have to turn to post-traumatic stress disorder. It can turn to a growth, right? It can turn into your energy and the reason that you get out of bed. I was super stoked to be able to do this class today. Why? Because you're asking me to serve. But you're asking me to serve and talking about death. No, I'm actually going to try to talk to you about anti-death. I'm going to try to flip the script. That's where I'm taking my energy. I have seen and walked with many people through some just awful, awful stuff. I've heard somebody die over the phone with me. You've watched people die in your own hands. Okay? These dark things happen and you're doing them on purpose. So how do we allow ourselves to use that as an energy and push forward with meaning? To live with meaning means you got to own it and you got to work with it. You got to talk about it. You got to share it. And you got to let other people share it with you. See where this is going? That's a living ideation. Yes, sir.
Question on the disorder part. Where are you in reframing that in regards to perhaps injury?
Say that one more time for me.
Reframing it as opposed to post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress injury.
Well, post-traumatic stress disorder is a diagnosis in the DSM.
Absolutely. But I'm just, from the reframing it, like the disorder part is so, from my perspective, crippling, and the injury lends itself to being hurt.
And I love it. And so I usually just leave injury even off. But injury, dude, we can tend to an injury, right? I sprained my ankle. Orthopedist gave me a boot. I'm treating an injury. I even actually use that kind of in a slide later. Injury, I completely agree with you, 1,000%. Injury, oh hell, just go, it's Tuesday, you get injured, right? Injury happens. And you know how to, hey, RICE, the whole acronym of rest, ice, compression, elevation. So we treat injury. I'm so glad that you brought that up. Disorder, oh no, fit for duty? You totally are, right? But we have to, post-traumatic stress disorder is the development, non-treated development of an injury. You get a barbed wire cut, it starts to get infected and start to go ugly. You don't treat it, gets a lot worse, right? Now you got a disorder. I'm so stoked you brought that up. Stress is treatable when you treat it. Hunger is treatable when you treat it. When you don't, it goes somewhere else and is still treatable. So I really want to destigmatize the concepts of depression, anxiety. Pretty much everything in the DSM minus about 4 pages is profoundly treatable. My name's in the back of the DSM. I know how to treat these things, and anybody who goes through the training of the DSM knows how to treat these things. But you all know how to treat the injury readily. And you probably would acknowledge that you can treat it even better when you're upfront about it. True? I may be the only male in the room or just person in the room that doesn't go to his physician very regularly. Nah, just rub some dirt in that. We'll be all right. But what if it's not all right? And what a silly mindset, right? I actually have insurance. It's cheap. So treat in a nutshell. Let me keep flying here. I've got so much and we won't be able to do it. Where am I on time? I'm going to do this anyway. What are the barriers? Stigma, stigma, stigma. What are the variables to our suicidal people? Pain, disfigurement. I worked with somebody not in first response, somebody who is a very, very successful athlete, somebody who was absolutely going to make money from athleticism. And then there was a hip injury. And it blew out the rotator cuff inside the pelvis and just shredded that rotator cuff. And so his words, he says, now I walk like a duck. So dude's not going to the NFL. Dude's done with college ball. And by the way, he didn't really pay attention in school either. I don't know how does that happen in college, right? His whole worldview. Think of this in all of the professions and all of the people who you serve. This dude's worldview, poof, It's now absence, right? It is deficient. So in absence, we are missing presence. Presence and absence. Light and dark. Think of a flipping the coin. This is the whole model of my living ideation model. Is you figure out what are the suicidal concepts or the dark depressive traits and know that there's an opposite. Everything comes in twos on these, right? I know despair because I know joy. Why do we grieve losing somebody? Because we love the hell out of them. You cannot have that grief unless you have gobs and gobs of love. So when we have grief, when we have pain, let us remember that only exists because there's also still love. Right? That's the whole concept. You start to flip a coin. So we work with people who have medical illnesses, disfigurements, hopelessness. One thinks that that's the bottom until you give them a reason to keep digging. More variables, bad relationships. This will come up, but hey, fire folk, what's it like to be in a relationship with you? Your giggles are enough, right? Hey, military folk, what's it like for your loved ones when you're on deployment? That's nice, right? Wow. So when there are strained relationships, some of you might have the thought, I'm worth more dead than alive. I just got to make it look like an accident. Then they'll be all better without me. The world's better without me. Wow, that's tough stuff. I am worth a hell of a lot more dead than alive, by the way. Lack of meaning. What if they lost their faith? I would encourage the chaplain folk in here not to start prescribing faith. Whoever just had that epiphany, I agree. Did you hear that ding? Ding. That's a fix-it mindset. Okay? That's a fix-it mindset. And I understand how you being healing type people would want to cut to the chase and get right to it. Hell, let's go start going through, hell, poor choice of words. Let's start going through some, let's start going through some scripture. Or let's just validate. This is a brutal time right now. Okay? In counseling, there's a very common concept. Meet them where they are. In education, there's a very common concept. We teach who come. Right? So when our loved ones are suffering, when we're suffering, let's not try to shake anybody or ourselves out of that mindset anytime soon. It'll evaporate and change quickly enough. Right? Especially if somebody's just going to pour a glass of lemonade or eat some pancakes. Money's an interesting one. Another presentation I have is called the flat tire moment. There's so many people. There was actually a study done about 20 years ago that when you'd get a flat tire in your car, that threw you into financial distress. You barely had enough money to keep going check to check. A flat tire tips you over. Can you imagine somebody who's in such a state? What that might do to them? A flat tire? That ain't worth dying over. We all know that, but the person who goes to that place doesn't. Sudden change in mental health, that's my work. Rationalizing absence, that's my line right there. More variables. We lose family members. So I put these up because you have professional families. You have tribes, right? You have tribes within tribes. Losing a close friend to suicide increases your suicidal ideation and your suicide attempts for at least a year. So diagnosticians and clinical dorks, we have to put timelines on things. So we put 365 and a quarter days on things for diagnoses. Anything that goes into that 366th day becomes a little bit shadier of ugly. So it's called complicated bereavement if it goes after exactly 1 year. Okay, let's call it bereavement. Because is there a time frame on grief and on pain? No. But research people like to try to put that on there. Nonetheless, if you lose somebody close to you, a family member, you're at higher risk. Do you know why? Sir, what?
You're constantly thinking about it.
You are constantly thinking about You loved this person. You still love this person. You can't access this person. Yeah, that's flooded your brain now. Suicide's now on the menu of your thoughts, right? You're already overwhelmed with pain and the truck payment. You're normal people doing super normal things, so you have all that going for you already, and you lose somebody in your tribe or in your family. Oh my goodness. So of course your suicidal opportunities or rates would be higher, right? Because you just got tipped over hard. My BLM people, right? Denio. Remember what happened in Denio a couple years back? And other people might too. That shook folks in the wildland community and even beyond so hard that we're still talking about it. That we're actually doing program development because of that. But it would be understandable that people would be considering their own darkness and their own life in the wake of that, right? I got into BLM work a year and a half ago because of suicide in Wyoming. That I went up there and I said, the only way to do this is to put each district in the room at the same time, and we're going to just do this out loud, and we're going to do this as long as we need to. And we're just going to talk. But you talk with a trained clinician, we do some Jedi shit while we're doing it, and we start moving it to see if people are going to be okay, and see if we can get you a little bit happier, or at least content. But holy moly, when you lose somebody from your family, professional family, real family, whatever it is, it shakes you to your core and it makes you consider, what am I about? And if you're in such a tough place that you don't have an understanding of what you're about, you see how suicide's an option? Non-suicidal behaviors are variables of suicide. Just maybe people do some adrenaline kind of stuff. Has anybody ever jumped out of a perfectly good airplane not for work? Yeah, no smoke jumpers in here. You've done that on purpose. You'd be like, whee! That's silly. Right?
Yeah.
I also learned how to fly a perfectly good airplane too.
Thank you. Who owns a motorcycle? And if you don't currently own a motorcycle, who's ridden a motorcycle? You kept it under the speed limit, of course. Yeah, assuming that was on a road. Okay? As I said, I know pretty much every dirt road north of Nye County. We do things that give us some vroom, that fire us up, to a point that could be concerning, because it's a coping mechanism, which makes me ask the question, what are you coping? When we do things to kind of cover up how we're feeling, I want to know, what were you feeling? When you are in first response or fire service, or really any line of work, if you find the person that is so over-identified with their profession, they're overworking, they're the workaholic, what are you covering up there? More often than not, it's pain or insecurity. So if we can start to create a culture from within, not from the top down, from within, that we talk about insecurity, we talk about tough times, we talk about pain, all right. I guess I'm not out of my mind for being bothered by that call today then. Does that make sense? These are the variables of suicide if they go unspoken. I got to watch the clock. Survivors are at risk. Yeah, just look at the middle two bullets, because that one makes us laugh, especially because I have enough females in the room. Women who lose husbands to suicide are 16 times greater chance of killing themselves. Men, what's wrong with you fellas, who lose wives to suicide have a 46 times greater chance of suicide. Chocolate.
Waters.
Take as many as you want. Look at that. Ladies who lose their husbands, fellas who lose their wives, that's a much different number. Want to make fun of the fellas for a second? I do. Right? I'm a well-kept man.
I would see that women have a much larger support system than men after response to that.
That is super insightful, and I wish there was truth to it, because it makes a lot of sense. It comes down to one very simple thing. Method. Men are 3, so that's approximately a 3-to-1 ratio right there. Dudes are 3 to 1 more lethal than women are. Women, however, attempt 3 to 1 to men. The predominant method is lead poisoning, for men especially. They kill them to death by firearm, right? So men are much more lethal. Grief is grief, and it's not like there's particularly a gender difference in who grieves harder or who grieves more, right? By that stat, it says that the fellas are absolutely weak sauce. It's not about that. It ends up coming down to the method of death. Makes more sense. I just like to poke fun. More variables. History within systems. This is where some clusters start to come up. I'll get to that. Suicide clusters is, well, we kind of already did that. What do I want to talk about? What is trauma? Do y'all know what trauma is, or do you want to talk about what trauma is? I got enough bobbleheads. I only needed one. This is what trauma is right here. Hold on. That. It's hard to read. You don't have to read them all. The next slide's going to show them on essentially a spoked wheel. These are the common variables of trauma. When we are exposed to trauma, we show these types of responses. A sense that no one can ever do enough. Hypervigilance. Anybody in this room real comfortable going into a restaurant with your back to the door? Okay. My hand's up. How many backed their vehicle in? Right? Why do you do that? An appropriate egress, right? It's just smart. It's logic. When you got to move your ass moment, you do it. It's one less thing. One less thing. My son called. I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old son. This is bad dadding right here. Dad, one less thing. I'm like, oh, damn it. That came from me. Right? It's this hypervigilance of one less thing. I got that out of the way. I got that out of the way. Got that out of the way. I guarantee when I get home, my son's doing his homework. It's Friday, kid. Watch Scooby-Doo or something. Nope. Dude's going to be one less thing. That's mine. I paid that one forward. I think it's going to work well for him, but... Dissociative moments. Look at number 9. Dissociative moments. You check out on minor details. You should. Because you better be on the big, important details. Right? But you check out on little stuff. I'm not the only one in this room that's the, honey, did you hear anything I just said? Right? You check out. Okay. Just be a little bit more aware of these things, because then you're less likely to. And maybe love your colleagues and your family and your professional people as they're doing it. It makes sense. So pal up with that. Any of them. Anger and cynicism. Anybody in here also have outbursts of anger from time to time? More often than not. Anger is the easiest damn thing to treat in the world, in my opinion, and I'm right, because anger comes down to 2 things, fear and pain, 100% of the time. Search your own brains, your own Rolodex. Every anger outburst you've ever had was steeped in the basics of fear and pain. That's it, that's all. So anytime I'm working with somebody who's a rager, I dial in what they're insecure and what they're afraid of. Yes, sir? Say again?
Frustration.
Frustration's going to be kind of the little cousin of anger. Rage would obviously be the ugliest version. So it's kind of like a vertical spectrum of annoyance, frustration, anger, rage, violence. Tantrums are in there somewhere, right? So the spectrum of an anger outburst, it's a mutated false expression, usually of an insecurity. Imagine, off shift, you go home, you know that everything was cleaned and buttoned up before you left shift, right? That's how you did it. And then you go home and you see there's friggin' dishes everywhere. And what in the world is a sock doing in the middle of the floor? You see where anger starts coming? It's a displacement of a lack of control, a lack of predictability. Those are insecurities and fears. The fear that you don't have your act together, that's a pretty understandable fear, especially for superhero type of people, right? When you are charged to serve and to help people, and you go home and there's a sock on the floor, Really? Some people are that much of a house of cards that it comes apart. You come unraveled at a sock. So these are the people that are the dog kickers. You end up kicking your dog. I hope your dog bites you. Any of those. Inability to empathize or numbing. Anybody get a little short-tempered for people who cut corners? Just me? This is all of those around a wheel. The reason I put them around a wheel is because this is a concept in shrinkology called equifinality. It doesn't matter which road you take, it's going to get to the middle and impact everything. Every ray of that star is part of that star. So burnout, kind of a cliche, overused phrase, but you burn out when any of those or all of those are not tended to. Well, can you see them happening in your colleagues and in your loved ones? And will you allow them to see them within you? That's the living ideation. That's the cultural shift of course that stuff happens. It would happen. Now let me put my hand on your back and let's go figure out what kind of chow we're going to make, right? But yes, this happens. Let's talk about it, walk with it, and now let's go do something that adds to it, right? I was in Firehouse a couple of weeks ago. These guys are doing it right. Made ribs. Good ribs. And so of course I stayed. But what does that do to tension? Real barbecue sauce, not out of this bottle and stuff. In this house, they made some food. So of course I stayed. What does food do? It's a something in addition to, right? Unless it's an MRE, that's going to make your mood worse. Awful. Anybody not know what an MRE is? I just threw up a little. Okay, I already asked this. Sometimes it's really awful to be in a relationship with you. Okay, well, I hope that you can recognize that and allow your loved ones to talk to you on that level. I hope that people can confront you and that you can confront them. That's when it moves. What do we want to talk about? I want to talk about, no, don't drink too much. Know when not to. Talk about drinking another day. Post-traumatic growth from surviving to thriving. This is not new, but consider a very simple spectrum. There's something that's pretty wild that happens. You're traumatized, you're affected, you're upset. Okay? You survive it. Well, what happens? Ultimately, I hope that, well, actually you're a victim to it first. It happens, smacks you right upside the head. Then you survive it. It's not just surviving your day, your career, putting in your time so that you can get your highest 3. That's survival mode. How do we get you to thrive it? I'm talking to quite a few people today who have retired and come back to serve again. That's it. That's thriving. You're doing something pretty amazing with it. And just so the few of you can feel good about what you're doing, everybody gets to do this in some form or fashion. You're not just who you are when you're on a clock. So how do you get to have things smack you upside the head, survive them, but then turn it into some type of mindset of thriving? That's the idea of a living ideation. We can take it and use it as a superpower, right? Here's how we do it. That's it. Wait a minute, that's it? That's it. Changing your priorities to pursue what makes you happy. Well, I can't. I'm in the middle of a season. Yeah, I know. When I was up in Wyoming doing preseason last year, that came up and be like, dude, you're crazy. We're about to go into season and you're telling me to go do what makes you happy? Go, dude, I know you can't do that right now, but what do you like to do? So called him out. I'm like, what do you like to do? Like, I dig skiing. I like being outside, getting on the water, all that stuff. All right, well, it's going to get hot. You're going to recognize heat like you haven't forgotten, but you like skiing, so where do you want to go skiing? He starts talking about he's always wanted to go to the Tetons, do some helicopter skiing. Like, all right, well, we're going to break here for lunch. What would it be like to actually go call your buddies and plan a trip? He did it. We reconvened after lunch, and he's like, I got my 3 guys. We figured out the tour company. We're going in November. I'm like, rad. but he still gets to go through fire season, right? But now he's got goalposts that he's kicking at. So through the whole tumultuous season, dude's got a goal, right? So every time that he is just getting his ass kicked, going up a face, he's going to think about jumping out of a perfectly good helicopter with skis. And that'd be pretty cool for him. It's nuts, right? Build closer relationships with friends and family. I don't want this to just be your outside of your work friends and family. I insist that you get to know each other within your house, within your crew, within your department and district better. But that implies that you'll allow them to know you better. I'm asking you to be vulnerable with each other because that's where the magic is, right? If somebody knows that you have a kiddo that you're worried about, imagine one of your professional loved ones has a special needs child or an aging parent who they're worried about. If you could dial in on that with them, that's intimacy. So maybe we shouldn't just save those for our friends and our families. Maybe we should save it for the people who we, or also offer it to the people who you spend more time with. You spend more time with a lot of people at work than you do, especially if you're a seasonal employee, than you do with your people at your zip code, right? Folks in your home address probably get less of you and know a whole lot more of you, freckles and all. But maybe your professional loved ones get to know what hurts and also what doesn't. Getting a clear sense of identity. Who is still, so the fellows who are on shift right now and lady, are you the same person today as you were 5 years ago? You're like, oh, hell no, right? Of course not. And the folks who are still working right now, who've been working for 20 years, 20 plus, 20 plus, 20? Were we talking about suicide and living and hurts and feelings and lemonade? No. So I honor you indescribably, and I'm talking to the younger generations. We keep talking about this because it's working. It's going somewhere. Look how many people are in this room right now. We're talking about anti-death. We're talking about hurting, and we're making it sound like it's normal because it is, right? So isn't that beautiful? It really is. And it does help people save their own lives because it allows us to help them. Focus on meaning and purpose. So we've got a lot of chaplain folk in here. Great. This one's easy for you. But it may not just be a verse. Probably isn't. Might be the fact that you have a truck payment or whatever that is. Focus on meaning and purpose. I'm thinking about my dad again when I popped off. The meaning of life is to live with meaning. It's the truth, right? And whatever brings you meaning today probably didn't bring you the same kind of meaning a little while back. So it's safe to say that it won't bring you the same kind of meaning a little ways up. So when we find somebody's in a super dark spot, they've lost their identity with meaning. If we can get them to own that they have changed throughout the years, then maybe they'll get on board with the fact that more changes could happen. Right? Yeah, you lost your wife, your kids. She even took your motorcycle, sold it. Horrible. You don't have any custody of those kids. You owe a bucket full of child support. Your beloved truck, yeah, that's going to go. That's ridiculous. Wait a minute. And now you got certain people that are concerned about your ability to work, your fitness for duty. Huh. And your mom's sick? And your back hurts? That's a tall mountain right there. But I wonder what it looks like a little ways down the road. There's no way over this. No way through that mountain. Okay? And what happens if we do nothing? Something. And I can role play with any of you if you want to try to get one past me. Worst thing that happens is I commit you. And I already talked about goals and dreams. Go skiing. Okay? Viktor Frankl. Does anybody know who Viktor Frankl was? Anybody else? She got the Jeopardy question. Viktor Frankl was a medically trained young man as the Nazis were invading Central and Western Europe. And they rallied so many people together, they interned them, put them in concentration camps, beat them, killed them, starved them, tested them. Frankl was medically trained, so he had a little bit of use. And while he's in these concentration camps, he wrote his experiences in the concentration camp. He had to write the book 4 different times because when people would find out, they would beat him within a millimeter of his life and obviously destroy everything he was writing. But he kept writing it. He was always intrigued with they could starve him. I mean, it's a 2-chapter book. And the first 110 pages are the experiences in a concentration camp. The last 40 pages are called logotherapy. It's a type of therapy. But Frankl wrote about his experiences. He would talk about his daily ration was a ladle full of pea soup. Pea soup is a bit of an embellishment. There'd be a couple of husks of peas in the bottom of that kettle. The rest is just warm water, dirty water. And people would be overjoyed if they got one of those husks. And he thought that was a little bit puzzling. We're all dying here, and people are completely stoked with getting the husk of a pea. And he was just incredibly interested in the fact that he was dying. He was agonizing in pain, and the songbird over the razor wire in the forest was pretty. All of those happened at the same time. So this is in line with my existential philosophy of what does it mean to exist? Oh, hell, I don't know. But I am here, so maybe if I can try to pull some meaning out, it can move. And it did move. And then his camp was liberated. And then he turned into a profound author and legend, right? I'm going to go rogue for a second. So that's one of his quotes. Think of you, especially in fire service. Hey, badasses, that which is to give light must endure burning. So you got what it takes. I would encourage you to tend to that, though. So Viktor Frankl, in his aging years, again, very, very famous person in Central Europe. So a couple of towns over, there's a burglar. Burglar breaks into a residence, is burgling, as burglars do, right? And gets apprehended. And the police are apprehending this person. They're like, all right, son, what's your name? And the knucklehead says his last name, and it's Frankl. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You say Frankl? As in Sir Viktor Frankl? He's like, yeah, that's my uncle. Like, oh, we can't take this guy to jail or anything like that. So they find Viktor Frankl. They say, can we please bring your nephew to you? Like, oh, gentlemen, yes, thank you. Please bring him in. So these 2 officers bring in knucklehead Frankl, and he's at his desk writing, Viktor Frankl is, and he looks up and he goes, thank you so much. Go ahead and have a seat, to the kid. Cops leave. Nephew sits. He sweats him, right? He keeps writing for a while. Nephew's got to be all agitated in his seat. And Viktor Frankl just leans up, puts his pen down, and he says, you aren't paying attention. You may go. That's all I said. You aren't paying attention. So think about that. Maybe the cure to our pain is to pay attention to pain. Maybe the concept of your careers is to pay attention, but maybe not just that type of attention, right? Maybe the secret to love is to pay attention. Maybe the secret to health is to pay attention. Injury, right? Pay attention. Stress, pay attention, right? If you are to be able to still give light, you surely must be able to endure. But if you don't tend to the endurance, then you don't. You're not endurant. I've got a couple very long, obnoxious distance races planned this spring. So would it be advisable to train? Right? Yeah. Those miles don't run themselves. You got to train. Viktor Frankl was a badass. I'm going to teach you about, suicide risk. You know what to look for. I'm going to teach you what to do with it. Most suicide plans do this. They want to know 4 basic things. They need to know 5. Are you thinking about hurting yourself, killing yourself? That's suicidal ideation. Are you thinking about it? You get a fish on, you move to the specifics. Do you have a plan for how you would take your life? Affirmative. Do you have the means? I do. This is like a real high-stakes game of Clue, by the way. Okay? Do you know when you would do this? And how truly intent are you? Are you sure? That's the basic suicide model. And that's embedded in every suicide reduction model. And I'm not saying throw that away. I'm saying do something first. We're going to try to search for meaning. In the absence of meaning, we'll do that. But I firmly believe this, and this has been my experience for approximately 15 years, that I can work with somebody who doesn't think they have meaning, and we can find an ember and we can get it to light, and we can create enough meaning to agree to go have pancakes next Tuesday, right? So in the absence of meaning, I want a shot at that. I'm going to hang with you, we're going to hang with each other, and we're just going to exist and prove that we didn't die. Because we're really damn good at living every single day up to this one. We're really good at living. We just got to try to remember how and why. So, those are the suicide models. Once they think that they have somebody who is dangerous to themselves, they try to weight it in lethality. Low, moderate, high, severe, green, yellow, red, whatever it is. Kind of serious about it, super, super deadly about it. So, do they have the specifics of dying, and then how intent are they for dying? These are this is essentially the meta-analysis of suicide models, right? Here's my model. You're going to laugh because I copyrighted it and I'm going to get paid for it. And you're just going to be pissed that you didn't do it because it's a no-brainer. We're taught to focus on the absence or an illness reduction model. If you flip the metaphorical coin and you amplify the living model, you probably diminish depression and anxiety. Therefore, suicide isn't happening. I'm just asking you to treat living, increase living, and you outcompete dying. Rarely do we focus on the flip side, a living plan, the living means, the living time frame, the living intentions. So if you think about that seasonal dude that I talked to, we did just that. Dude, what do you like to do? I love skiing. How about some gnarly, stupid stuff at the top of the Tetons out of a helicopter? Yes, sweet. There's his means. When? November. You sure about it? Doing it. Just booked it. Is that guy going to take his life right now? Nope. I don't know what season looks like, but he was pretty stoked going into it. So we take those concepts, like I just told you. It's the same things of a living ideation. And now here's this. Some thoughts of living. No plan for living. Says he or she won't die by suicide, yet won't commit to living. Do you notice how it inverted the seriousness? So low suicide risk, but low living ideation are actually the polar opposites of each other. So when I'm talking to somebody about the good stuff and they're giving me nothing, the inverse reaction gets me concerned. When I'm talking to somebody about suicide and they give me lots, I'm super concerned. When I'm talking about happy and they give me nothing, I'm super concerned. Give me enough time, and all of a sudden pass a slice of garlic bread, because if you don't like garlic bread, you're weird, right? Then all of a sudden, you're living. When you hydrate, your body perks up just like a plant, and you're living. When you sleep, holy cow, if this isn't the one. When you are rested, we are indeed rested. Clinical folk, we think of, these are called neurovegetative signs of functioning. I can ask 7 questions, and if I get negative, if I get an absent response, I ruled out every diagnosis in the DSM. Ready? Are you currently suicidal? No. Ding! Are you currently homicidal? No. Sweet, I'm on a roll. No one's dying today. How are you sleeping? I'm sleeping all right. Sweet. How's your energy level? It's okay. How's your appetite? Good. How's your overall mood? Fine. Are you sexually able? Yeah. You got nothing going on except life. But think of those variables. However, sleep, it's called SEAMS, S-E-A-M-S. As your sleep goes, that impacts energy, appetite, mood, and overall. We ask about sexual functioning because it's a very basic demonstration of physical functioning, of overall health. Sleep is a domino effect that knocks them all down, right? So when I talk to somebody, how are you sleeping? Let's go all the way to, we talked about low, let's go all the way to super awesome. I have thoughts of prosperity. I have articulations of hope and meaningful relationships. Think that person's getting their 8? Somewhere toward it. Or if they're not, they find windows to make up for it. So you just kind of think in your own ways, is this person balanced? And if they're not balanced, I want to help them come into balance. That's a living ideation. Not, are they out of balance and how do I reduce that? Right? So we do tend to injury. I want to flip a script and I want to really tend to health. That's what allows us to be resilient. Health, not fortitude and thick skin. That's actually just, I think, trying to wear some armor. It means you're still hurting. And there's room and there's time for that. That has to happen in your fields. But if we don't start balancing out the living concepts, we're in trouble. Any questions? Captain Derek Reed put this together. Dude's kind of a stud. This is brilliant. Some of you are familiar with this concept. But look how it's changed. Be attentive for behavioral changes. If something feels off, investigate it. So how about if something feels off, it is. It is. What's the worst that happens when you start talking to somebody? Right? Hey, that was tough. Whew, that was wild today. You just kind of moved something forward. But if you ignore it, loneliness, darkness, atrophy, nightmares. But if you confront it, if something feels off, it is. So get in the game. Communications, confront with supportive intent. Listen, reflect, confirm. These are just basic counseling skills right here. Listen a hell of a lot more than you talk, right? And when you do talk, please don't just start slinging advice. It's so invalidating, especially if you have somebody who's in a deep, dark place. You start telling them that, hey, if you took your life, do you realize how bad that would hurt the team? Dick move. Okay? Do you realize how bad you're hurting and I want to just be with you because you deserve that? Wait a minute, I deserve that? Now they're in that little tussle in their brain. I feel dark, but I also deserve? Huh. When you have those extra options that your life's not just awful, you can start moving toward this. Well, I don't believe you, but I kind of want to, right? When you taste something that's delicious, homemade salsa, none of the garbage out of a jar. Good. It's these kinds of things. They crack the door on life's not perfectly awful. It's pretty damn awful and homemade salsa, right? Escape route. Show empathy and build an escape route through trust. They will follow you to a place of refuge if they trust you. Most of these things, when I go to these conferences and I speak, I'm going to Denver in a few weeks. This happens 100% of the time. I'm done. Yay, rah, rah, we're all feeling good. I walk out and somebody finds me out there. Like, can we talk for a couple minutes? What's my answer? Absolutely. But I have a plane to catch. What should I do? Depends. If they just want some contact information or talk about resources, cool, let's take like 3.5 minutes. We're going to rock this and then you can find me later. I got a plane to catch. But if I find somebody in despair, it's a good thing there's more than one plane in the world, right? Because when bells ring, when there are tones, you do your shit, right? Sometimes that happens even to a speaker in Denver. Safety zones must be large enough to feel safe. That's brilliant, by the way. Large enough to feel safe. Perceptions of judging or fixing could turn a safety zone into a deployment site. Wow. That one's, I think, the best one right there. Must be large enough to feel safe. All you got to do is be present. That's it. You don't have a magic wand. You didn't even need one, right? You just have an opportunity to normalize that things are rough, and we'll do it together. That I don't have your answer, you don't have my answer, but I bet we can start figuring something out. You know? Any other comments about this? Captain Reed made that into posters. He gave me permission to give this up to Bodie Ronk up at NIFC, and now BLM National has this model. Isn't that cool? You want to know where it came from? If you didn't already know, Tyler Ewald. Because his quote's right on the bottom. Always have your brother's back. If I could speak with Tyler, I would say, young man, please allow others to have yours too. That's the tough part. It's superhero stuff to have each other's back. And I know everybody in this room would have each other's back. You'll have anybody's back. You'll have a stranger's back. But will you let a stranger have yours? That's the bend. That's the living ideation, is respectfully get over yourselves and let people love you. Right? I mean that with respect. I got in a little bit of trouble up at NIFC because I told that to all of the people from Washington. I said, y'all got to get over yourselves. That kind of pissed them off a little bit. But let people love you. That's the road. So if we could have told Tyler that, thanks, man. Thank you for having my back. But you better let me have yours too. You got to let. That's the operating word. Let. Anything else on this? I can almost wrap up. I will. That one's dumb. How about real peer support? It's human. We already did that. Come on. Well, the computer might tell me we're done. This is how we change our culture from within. It's not just the people who are in the vertical part of the hierarchy. It's every one of us. It's the probies. It's the people who are just fighting fires. It's the people who are just EMS and working their way up. It's the person who's still in school, right? It's our 12-and-a-half-year-old son. It's everybody. We actually get to lead all of this by example. Mentors aren't just the people with more stuff on their uniform or with an office. Those aren't just your mentors. You're the mentors. But that implies that we're going to allow other people to mentor us as well. I invite you all to stop looking at the mentors that say, rub some dirt in it, toughen up. Well, I'll do that, and I'll toughen up, and I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. I'll toughen up and I'll be tough, and I'm going to try to walk with you in your tough stuff. It's all of that. That's real mentorship. Influenced by where you give your attention and influenced by how you don't give your attention, right? I have a whole segment on alcohol. I'll just put it in this nutshell. If you're leaning on alcohol a little bit too much, I'd like you to think about that and then fight. Sometimes it's the first drop of the third drink. That means you're drinking for different reasons. First one, it's an aftershifter, delicious. Second one, feels great. Third one, what are you up to? So it's the what are you up to? If it's to celebrate, all right, hope you don't do that all that often. If it's for something else, give it a little thought. I bet some of you people historically have bought ibuprofen in bulk, right? Be thinking. Influence with seriousness, but also influence with humor. I take those two to heart. I screw around a lot, but what we're talking about is so damn real. Okay? I'm talking about love, not death. Because if we go so much harder at the living concepts, everybody in here is really good at that. We are so good at living every day up to now. It's a lot of them. Some of you more than others. But we're good at living. We suck at dying. But when we start to get somewhat competitive, potentially, at the dying concept, love one another. The tough part is that it's going to happen to all of us too. We all, if we haven't, we will again, and we will, have really dark times. Will you allow me or anybody else to come and be with you in that? That's the cultural change. Will I allow you to walk with me? That's the culture shift. And there's no brass that can probably force that down your throat. I'm just asking you to start it. That's cultural change. What else do I got? My clock here says I have 1 more minute. Do this later. How about when you're going to use mental health professionals? I would ask you to do this. This is where HR departments and EAPs don't like me. Fine, I don't like them. Look for somebody who's worth their salt. Look for somebody who is a trauma-informed clinician. Look for somebody who fits well enough for you. If they feel like a clinical stiff, probably not what you're looking for. If they listen a hell of a lot more than they talk at you, and then when they are talking, they're just asking some pretty open-ended questions, they're walking with you. Those are your kind of people, right? Reputation drives, especially in these small communities. So ask around. I'm going to give you a little veteran move here. You're going to find the most talented clinicians probably are full. Push. Okay? Just push. Say the right things. I am really struggling. This is what I do for work. Can you find room? Because folks who do my line of work, we're soft as hell once you get through the outer crust. We love serving. Sound familiar? So those who love to serve and they've got the reputation that they're decent at serving, yeah, get after that, right? Don't say no for an answer. Do any of you have any questions or comments? Because I'm going to cut you loose here. Anything from any of you? Everybody who's working today, please be safe and thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right.